Evening. My name is Sapphire. Right now I'm going to introduce my friend, Nicole Sealey. Born in St. Thomas, raised in Central Florida, Nicole Sealey is a Cave Canem graduate fellow whose work was selected for inclusion in Best New Poets 2011, winner of the 2012 Poetry International Prize, and finalist in the 2011 Third Coast Poetry Prize. Her poems have appeared and are forthcoming in Callaloo, Harvard Review, Plowshares, among others, online and print journals. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Nicole Sealey, and on behalf of the 3,400 writers, translators, and editors of PEN, it's our great pleasure to welcome you to the 8th annual PEN World Voices Festival of International Literature. I'd like to take a moment to thank the festival sponsors and supporters, without whose generosity none of this would be possible, as well as the Standard and the Public Theater, which are serving as the festival's hubs this year. I'd also like to thank the more than 100 volunteers.
Oh, she's not on.
The more than 100 volunteers who have given their time to help us. So welcome, and I am thrilled to introduce and be in conversation with my good friend Sapphire, one of the boldest writers writing today. Sapphire is the author of 2 collections of poetry and best-selling novel Push. The film adaptation of her novel Precious received the Academy Award for Best Screenplay and Best Supporting Actress, in addition to the Grand Jury Prize and Audience Awards in the U.S. Dramatic Competition at Sundance. In 2009, she was a recipient for United States Artists Fellowship. She lives in New York City. Please help me welcome Sapphire.
Okay, someone asked me what was the happiest day of my life, and I said, this was someone who was interviewing me, and I said November 4th, 2008, and evidently that wasn't the right answer for him. It never made it into the interview. But I was thinking about that and that whole audacity of hope and a new day and a new dawn. So I wanted to ask Nicole to begin with one of her poems.
Thank you. Okay, this is entitled Imagine Sisyphus Happy. Give me tonight to be inconsolable. Give me just the duration of a good night's dream to wade in wreckage, so the death drive does not declare itself, so the moonlight does not convince the sunrise. I was born before sunrise, when morning masquerades as night, the temperature of blood quivering like a mouth in mourning. How do we author our gentle birth? The height we were. Were we gods rolling stars across a sundog sky, the same as scarabs? We fell somewhere between God and mineral, angel and animal, translated the world into man, then believed a thing as sacred as the sun can rise and fall like an ordinary beast. Deer sniff lifeless fawn before leaving them. Elephants encircle the skulls and tusks of their dead, none wanting to leave the bones behind, none knowing their leave will lessen the loss. But birds sometimes pluck their own feathers. Dogs can lick themselves to wound. Allow me this luxury. Give me tonight to cut and salt the open. Give me a shovel to uproot the mandrake and listen for its scream. Give me a hard face that toils so closely with stone. It is itself stone. I promise to enter the flesh again. I promise to circle, to ascend. I promise to be happy tomorrow.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we neglected to say, if you haven't already, please silence your cell phones. And I think maybe we should begin from from the kid, and then work backwards. Okay.
Fine with that.
First question. The kid was met with both acclaim and criticism. About that criticism, you've said that you understand that people sometimes need positive images, often at the expense of truth. But it's not your job to supply that truth. What then is your job?
Well, I think of my job as telling the story, getting as close to inconvenient and unpleasant truths as I can. I think the idea of the artist as a cultural massage therapist is wrong. I'm not here to make you feel good, you know. So I started an exploration in Push, and I was beginning to examine the cycle of abuse, and we get one real good picture of the 180 degrees of the victim, that child who is so winsome and winning in the end, and lovable, primarily because what has happened to her is not her fault, and she's not a perpetrator, and she just comes out shining. And in the kid, I wanted to look at 360 degrees. I wanted to look at the child as being abused, but I also wanted to look at the child as perpetrator. And I wanted to really examine what happens to the human soul when it is abused. And I think that was really painful for people. And some of it was when you're an artist, you paint the picture that you need to paint. And I think there's a way in a culture that is so commercial at times that, people have an expectation that you're really going to give them part two. They liked Push, and so they wanted Push number 2. They did not want a totally different book, which is what the kid was, a totally different style, a totally different examination of certain aspects of the culture. And I think that was really, people were angry at me, So.
Yeah. When did you decide not to save Abdul from all these situations? Because right after Push was published, you said, by human intervention, by entering into Precious's life and helping her change things, we possibly save her son from some of the same problems.
Well, what happens is, because just being committed to creating a certain kind of social realism, Abdul is saved. Precious dies when he is 9 years old. At the age of 9, he reads better than she did at 18. He's had a good life, but the so-called social net, the safety net, is not there as it is for most African American and Hispanic kids whose parents die of AIDS. They are immediately thrust into foster care or homelessness because not only usually if the mother has died, then other senior relatives have died, and they are just adrift. So what we see is this young woman really pull her life together and really try to give a life for her son, but she does not survive long, and when she dies, his world is adrift.
Would you mind reading just an excerpt from?
Sure. I'm going to read a couple of excerpts, but just this one right now. So this is, the book begins with Abdul. He's sleeping, he's in a dream, and a lot of this book, this boy spends dreaming and sleeping and being a little nightmare himself. So the first voice we hear is one of the last voices actually that we hear in Push, and this is Rita Romero, who was Precious's friend, and so she's telling him, "Wake up, little man." Rita's voice is coming under the covers at me. It's warm under the covers, smell good like Rita and clean like sheets. I curl up tighter, squeeze my eyes shut, and go back to sleep. In the dream, it's Mommy's birthday party, and she's holding me in her arms, kissing me and dancing with me. Our house is smelling like lasagna, wine, and people, mostly girls sweating and perfume. One girl is smoking weed. Everyone is laughing. Mommy puts me down and goes to open her presents. She's sitting in the blue armchair under the light. All the people have presents in their hands and are holding them out to her. A lady who looks nice, but when she smiles, all her teeth is black, is holding out a pretty present tied with a gold ribbon. No, 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 I want to say, but no words come out my mouth, and Mommy takes the box. And I want to say asleep, even though I know it's a bomb, and I'm not dreaming anymore. And if I was dreaming, the bomb would be exploding now. And now that it's too late, my voice would be loud. Abdul, someone is shaking my shoulder. Rita, I squeeze my eyes shut, because when I open them, when I stick my head out from under the covers, my mother will be dead, and today will be her funeral. So that is how the book begins, and that moment right there is the end of Abdul's childhood for all intents and purposes. That is the end. He is 9 years old, and that is the end of his childhood.
The stream of consciousness that Abdul uses to narrate his story, I want to talk about that. Yeah.
I'll just tell the truth. Between Push and the kid, I had read some James Joyce, okay? let me try that shit, you know. So that's where that came from. I confess. No, but I also wanted to, one of the visual images that I had with Push was of knitting and weaving and something. But even more weaving is there's the warp and woof, and the threads are going like that. With knitting, you're taking this one thread and you're knitting it, and it gets more and more. And then there's when you've made a mistake or come to the end, or you need to reknit, there's an unraveling. And so with the kid, we start with a child who has all language. He has all this language and this facility, and we begin to see him unravel. And of course, with Push, we're seeing someone who's already unraveled. You know, Precious comes to us unraveled, and we see her start to put back her life through the use of language. And here we see language being used to describe his breakdown and also his ascension. He does ascend and do certain things, but I'm using language in a different way, in a more complex way, to show a more complex character. He is a dreadfully complex character.
On that note, what role did negative capability, doubt, uncertainty, and bewilderment play in writing the kid? And do you think that readers, like writers, should also realize their capacity to be uncomfortable, or at the very least, content in uncertainty?
Exactly. And also to be, I don't know if you can ever be content, but to begin to grapple with and entertain, I think especially for me in the African American community, this real emphasis on the redemptive novel, the happy ending, at the expense of the truth, you know, at the expense of what is really happening to us. And I think when the novelist and the artist and the poet really insist on truth, the rewards are not that people are going to love you. And I mean, people, when Push came out, they called it pornography, you know. But the rewards, I think, are not prizes and things. I think the first time I really felt like, you know, I got prizes with Push and a movie and stuff, but around 6 months ago, the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta announced that for the first time in the AIDS epidemic as it affects African Americans, the rate of HIV infection among black women went down. And I said, my work was a part of that. I helped do that. But had I been writing for BMC, the black middle class, my work never would have been published because they did not want anyone to know that we had the highest rate of infection, HIV infection, of anyone in the country. It was shut up and talk about something else. Talk about how we survived slavery. But anything except what is really happening. And I think that when you insist upon talking about that, your work is not going to be popular, but it is going to be effective. Effective, you know what I mean? It is going to produce eventually certain kinds of results. I mean, that's my thought.
In thinking about audience and who those people are, I return to Toni Morrison in Playing in the Dark, Whiteness in the Literary Imagination. And she argues that up until recently, writers of color and white writers alike wrote for a particular audience, a white audience. Do you think this was and or still is true? And what are the demographics of the readers you envision while writing? And has that demographic changed over time with each book?
I think it has. I mean, I think when I wrote American Dreams, I was really talking to a very particular community, and I think I was really looking a lot at survivors. I was really looking a lot at people on the periphery of the culture. I was looking at other poets with their books in their backpacks, and really, I think the work was out there, but I was really expecting to be understood because I was around a lot of other people who were, I think, doing a lot of the same kinds of work, and I was really inspired by what they were doing. I think with Push, while I was writing it, I did not perceive a particular audience, but quickly I became aware that the book was going to be bigger than American Dreams, and I began to envision another kind of audience and began to think about how I was going to get this book to as many people as possible. So I remember when the book came out, I sent copies. I had my editor send copies to the CDC, to AIDS organizations. I had her send a copy to It Takes a Village to Raise a Child, Hillary Clinton. That type of thing. I really wanted the book to be effective on as many levels as possible.
Would you mind reading an excerpt from Push?
I'll just go to the beginning again. This is page 1 of Push. I was left back when I was 12 because I had a baby for my father. That was in 1983. I was out of school for a year. This is going to be my second baby. My daughter got Down syndrome. She's retarded. I had got left back in the 2nd grade too when I was 7 because I couldn't read and I still peed on myself. I should be in the 11th grade, getting ready to go into 12th grade so I can go on and graduate, but I'm not. I'm in the 9th grade. I got suspended from school because I'm pregnant, which I don't think is fair. I ain't did nothing. My name is Clarice Precious Jones. I don't know why I'm telling you that. Guess because I don't know how far I'm going to go with this story, or whether it's even a story or why I'm talking. Whether I'm going to start from the beginning or right from here or 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now, sure, you can do anything when you're talking or writing. It's not like living when you can only do what you're doing. Some people tell a story and it don't make no sense or be true, but I'm going to try to make sense and tell the truth. Else what's the fucking use? Ain't there enough lies and shit out there already?
That's great. So what does fiction allow you to do that poetry hasn't? Because
I think it was just a series of experiments. I'm going to read a poem here. I started out really trying to write about the some of what was in Push in poetry, and it was like it just wasn't working. And so this was one of the poems that made me know that I was going to seek another form, and I wasn't always sure whether it was. I didn't know whether I was going to write a novel or whether I would do a performance piece, a play or something like that. So page 95. This is called Some Different Kind of Books, and this was one of the poems I started on, and this is called Some Different Kinds of Books. And it's about a literacy student. She asks why we always read books about black people. I spare her the news she is black. She wants something different. Her own book is written in pencil. She painstakingly goes back and corrects the misspelled words. We write each day. Each day the words look like a retarded hand from Mars wrote them. Each day she asks me, how do you spell didn't, tomorrow, done, husband, son, learning, went, gone? I can't think of all the words she can't spell. It's easier to think of what she can spell. My name is Carmen Lopez. I am sorry I was out, teacher. My husband was sick. You know I never missed school. In that other program, I wasn't learning nothing. Here I'm learning, so I come. What's wrong with my husband? I don't know. He's in the hospital. He's sick, real sick. I was almost out the room when I hear the nurse ask him, do you do drugs? He say, yes. I say, what? I don't know nothing about no drugs. I'm going off in the hospital. He's sick. I'm mad. Nobody tells you nothing. I didn't hear that nurse. I wouldn't know nothing. Huh? Condoms? No, teacher. He's my husband. I never been with another man. 2, I think he got AIDS. He still don't tell me. I did, teacher. I tried to read the chart at the hospital, but I couldn't figure out those words. Doctor don't say, he say privacy. The nurse tell me, she's Puerto Rican, she say, your husband got AIDS. I go off in the hospital, nobody tells me nothing. He come home, he say it's not true. He's fine. He's so skinny without his clothes. He try to hide himself naked, don't want me to look. I say, you gotta use one of those things. He say nothing's wrong with him. 3, he stopped saying that. Now he just say he gonna die all the time, dying. I say, stop that talk. The doctor say you could live a long time. My sister-in-law say, he got it, so you got it. It's like that. I say, I don't got it. My kids don't got it either. Teacher, I need a letter for welfare that I'm coming to school on a regular basis. 4, he's in PR. Before that, he started messing around again. Over the Christmas holidays, he died. That's why I was at in PR. I'm fine. Yeah, I'm sure, teacher. What do I want to do, teacher? I just want to read some different kind of books. So that was, you know, starting with that, and I had a couple of, you know, vignettes I was working on, but the subject itself seemed so big and so hidden. And at the time I was writing this, all the money, all the attention, everything was downtown toward, you know, white gay men and AIDS. There was just this horrific silence about AIDS in the African American community, and especially heterosexually transmitted HIV and among black women. So it just wasn't talked about, and I just felt like I need a bigger vehicle, and I don't think I just said I need a bigger vehicle, but you know what I mean. I just the poems were not saying all I wanted to say, and so then I began to kind of experiment with this novel, and the result was Push.
Mm. You work a lot in persona when it comes to poetry. Why is that?
It could be some of what I read. I read a lot of, you know, Browning when I was young. You know, dramatic monologues. One of my favorite poets is You know, I think I brought her book here. I brought. Everybody asked me who are your influences and all that shit. I brought the books. So I brought the I don't know how many people. Do people know her?
Yeah.
Yeah. Give a shout out. Shit. Clap. Anyway, so I'm gonna read one of her poems right now because she is definitely a gone mentor who's now one of our black, brown, and yellow and white multiracial angels. She is 1/2 Japanese, 1/8 Choctaw, 1/4 black, and 1/16 Irish. So it's a multiracial angel. So, pardon me? Hybrid. Yeah. An American. Part the kid is divided into four parts, and each part begins with a little epigraph. I'll read you all the epigraphs. So one of my favorite novelists, so I'm 9, this is the part I read to you in the beginning, that was from, that's because Abdul is 9 years old when Precious dies. And so this is, so one of my favorite books of all time and favorite authors is Flannery O'Connor. And part of that is because she was a believing Catholic, and I'm a non-believing Catholic, but something in that sensibility of fire and craziness. But this is from Wise Blood, and so this totally very different novel. But where you come from is gone. Where you thought you were going to never was there, and where you are is no good unless you can get away from it. So she couldn't have written that about Abdul, but where he's coming from is gone. Mom is gone. What you thought you were going to be, black middle class, forget about that shit. You're off to the foster care. So your life plan has been disrupted, and where you are, unless you can get away from it, you know, you're going to be in bad shape. So section 2 begins with is called Falling, and it is because Abdul falls, and that comes from I think I got that actual title Falling thinking from Ernest Gaines has a novel called one of the novels In My Father's House, and in My Father's House the protagonist is on one side of the room and something else is happening on the other side of the room. The man literally falls. I don't know, you know, he literally falls, but here it's a figurative fall. But it begins with he's 9, and in this section of the book he's 13, 14. So it begins with, I'm 14. I'm a wind from nowhere. I can break your heart. So this is where that comes from. This is the kid. My sister rubs the doll's face in mud, then climbs through the truck window. She ignores me as I walk around it, hitting the flat tires with an iron rod. The old man yells for me to hitch the team, but I keep walking around the truck, hitting harder until my mother calls. I pick up a rock and throw it at the kitchen window, but it falls short. The old man's voice bounces off the air like a ball I can't lift my leg over. I stand beside him waiting, but he doesn't look up. I squeeze the rod, raise it, his skull splits open. My mother runs toward us. I stand still, get her across the spine as she bends over him. I drop the rod and take the rifle from the house. Roses are red, violets are blue, 1 bullet for the black horse, 2 for the brown. They're down quick. I spit, my tongue's bloody, I've bitten it. I laugh, remember the one out back. I catch her climbing from the truck, shoot. The doll lands on the ground with her. I pick it up, rock it in my arms. Yeah, I'm Jack, Hogarth's son. I'm nimble, I'm quick. In the house, I put on the old man's best suit and his patent leather shoes. I pack my mother's satin nightgown and my sister's doll in the suitcase. Then I go outside and cross the fields to the highway. I'm 14. I'm a wind from nowhere. I can break your heart.
That's great.
So that was who I was reading. That was whose light I was standing in, trying to get my light to shine.
I want to come back to the question of persona, but since we're already on the topic of your influences, my professor has me thinking about influence as a kind of revision.
Right.
Who are your writerly influences, and through your own work, are you revising or reimagining their work?
I think so. I think in many ways, if you look at the kid, and then you look at James Baldwin's Another Country, the character Rufus in there, maybe certainly there's a bit of Bigger Thomas in Abdul. is definitely there. So those are big influences. And then trying to go the places where Richard Wright and James Baldwin couldn't go. So they were able to talk about men devastating women, but they were not able to talk about men being devastated. They were not able to talk about male rape. So in this book, and I don't know of any other mainstream book in African American culture, it might be why they hate it so much, we're really looking at the issue of male on male rape and how what a destructive force that is, and how that has just been totally silenced. So we know, I had a friend tell me years and years ago, I said, how was prison? And he said, it's fuck or be fucked. And so we have large percentage, you always hear that statistic, a large percentage of men, African American men, more black men in prison than in college, but we have not dealt with what's happening in the prisons, and we're not dealing with the young men are going in without HIV and they're coming out with HIV. You didn't get it from the tomato soup. And we're also not looking at the devastation that this wrecks among the African American family. So, Moynihan insisted that everything wrong with the black family was the black woman because she was strong and had a job. Mm-hmm. And they haven't really looked at, and no one has really looked at, what is the effect of this post-traumatic stress of people coming out of these prisons being raped or having to rape other people. How do they come back out and raise effective families? So, why is there such a high degree of schizophrenia and mental illness among people who have been foster children and who have been in prison? So all of that stuff, this book looks at. It mm-hmm. looks at the fragmentation of a male soul, and that has not been looked at in a certain kind of mm-hmm. a way before. Mm-hmm. And I think it was really problematic for people. Mm-hmm. And so in Push, what I was looking at too was The Bluest Eye, of course, and The Color Purple, mm-hmm. and the Color Purple's all through Push. Precious reads The Color Purple. That's her favorite book. And but in Push, I really wanted to show a young woman who is saved by her own graces. So in The Bluest Eye, the rape victim is destroyed. She's totally killed. Piccola dies. Wanders in madness. In The Color Purple, basically Sealey is saved by a romantic relationship. In Push, Precious is saved by working hard and learning to read and write. And I wanted to hold that out for young women that, okay, suppose there is never a knight in white shining armor. You know what I mean? You can save yourself mm-hmm. through acquiring certain skills.
Back to persona and talking about black men in prison. Central Park 5 just came out, a documentary about the Central Park jogger case. It's a case in which 5 black and Latino boys were wrongly accused of brutally raping a white woman in Central Park in 1989. And you wrote a poem about that entitled Wild Thing. And I have actually a quote from a Facebook thread that I was a part of asking you a specific question. So
I'm not really interested in her Facebook thread.
Okay.
But I will address that whole
okay.
issue. And because you asked me about it earlier, and one of the things I thought, basically that people were accusing me of having written the poem, this is not the first, written the poem that just kind of inflamed sentiments. And also some people accused me of having written the poem for economic gain or whatever. So I never, first of all, I just want to say that the poem was printed in a small press journal, and my payment was 1 copy of the journal, not even 2 copies of the journal. So this was but also the poem was written in 1989, so I knew I could not really, right now where I am is, in defense, like angry, you're misunderstanding me. So I thought I would go back to 1994. Someone is asking me then about the poem, and this is actually a friend of mine, Carlo Malchiotti, who is, and this is the New Press Literary Quarterly, so that's me in 1994, who is asking me about the poem. And so Giancarlo says, in poem for Jennifer, Marla, Tawana, and me, the speaker says, I have no one to protect but women. Let these men keep clutching their balls, crying about how hard it is to be a man. Have you been, so that's a quote from one of the poems, he says, have you been stereotyped as an anti-male poet? This is me. Not as much as I thought. The worst criticism in general was when Reverend Donald Wildman latched on to the poem Wild Thing because of the brief allusion to homoerotica associated with Jesus Christ. And that was only because it appeared in an NEA-funded publication. He sent out letters to George Bush and members of Congress complaining that our tax dollars were being spent on blasphemy and filth. And this made the poem Wild Thing famous, not, so if people aren't, and this is Giancarlo, if people aren't hip to the technique of putting oneself into another's mindset, they could view Wild Thing as an indictment of either one of the black males or of the white woman jogger in Central Park, depending on if the reader, listener is white or black. I was invited to a conference where the audience was mostly black homeless women, mothers with some male children who are bound to be in some kind of trouble. I thought they'd be the denial set, not my boy, just like Jeffrey Dahmer's grandmother, who said that the bones in the basement were only animal bones. Well, wouldn't you want to know where your son was coming home with animal bones? But anyway, I read the poem and I was really shaking. And then a few women thanked me. I won't say the black community loves that poem, but I didn't encounter the denial that I expected. What about the white community? I've had some white people get up and walk out after hearing Wild Thing. It scares them. The character of Leroy is real. He is a stunted human being whose opportunities have been shut out. His hope is null, and he will pick up a rock and crack your skull. People would rather not hear that, or they would rather hear it just in the daily news to have Leroy reduced to an animal so that he can be contained. When you look at him as a human being, you have to acknowledge that the conditions which created him are creating a million more like him. It is a frightening poem. Giancarlo, you are the last person to justify the beating of a woman. For someone to misread the poem, that is and was painful. You have to hope that your audience will eventually acquire the sophistication to understand. That's all I can hope for. You really can't take one poem in isolation. You have to read a broader scope of an author's work. Once it's in context, you can understand that violence is part of what I deal with. I can't tone down my work. As I get older, it will tone down itself. Well, it didn't happen. I won't write Mickey Mouse is a Scorpio again. My editor once asked me if I had something else like Wild Thing. I said no, and I won't. Poem for Jennifer. I said what I needed to say at the time, and I won't say it again. So that's who I was when I wrote the poem. What I thought was that I was giving some insight into why a child would do a horrific thing like that. I was in no way trying to inflame sentiments. I wasn't trying to make money. I wasn't trying to capitalize off of it. No one would have ever heard the poem if it hadn't been for, Grandpapa Bush talking about it was filth and that the NEA had funded the publication. So the question that comes up is, well, would you write that poem today? Of course not. I would not have written American Dreams today. There's so much. There's so much self-censorship that you just lay on yourself. I probably wouldn't now, might not have written Push. So you write what you write at the time, and you stand by it. The poem is still the poem. The poem is still the poem. And sadly, the poem does not, fortunately, the poem does not speak to the Central Park Five, the poem does speak to the child who did it, and it was an African-American child. And it wasn't five of them, it was one child who was so murderously enraged that not only did he do this rape, he had raped before and then blinded his victim so that the woman couldn't testify against him. And this was a child. So we're dealing with that type of rage and that type of break in the psyche that happens when people are abused and they become horrific abusers. But the poem still portrays Leroy, the name I give him, as a human being. You know, so I was trying to give psychological insight into what type of person might create a horrific event. And I can't help how people used it. You know, people have used push to justify cutting black women off welfare. You know, they show Mama's character and say, well, the black woman herself has written about welfare abuse. I mean, that's not why I wrote Push. But it's like a child. You send them out, and you don't have control once they grow up. Once the work is published, people are going to use it. I mean, that's one of the big fears that silences oppressed people. I don't know how many people I've talked to in my workshops, you know, Jewish women, black women, Hispanic women, you know, well, the whole world is against us. If I write about my father raped me, that's going to just, how can I write about that? How can I write about that? You know, they're already down on us. You know what I mean? It's just going to make us look bad, you know.
Well, I think there's 30 minutes left, so I want to open it up for questions, but not before. Maybe, can you read a couple of your new poems? I was
going to ask you to read a poem. Oh. Okay. One of the things that I was thinking of was just the way you seriously use pop culture to open up the soul of this of your young speaker. So if you could read as much of this as you feel comfortable reading.
Okay. Okay. All right, this is entitled An Apology for Trashing Magazines in Which You Appear, and it's after Denise Duhamel's poem, Delta Flight 659. I was out of line, Brad Pitt. You are no Elliot Spitzer, I am no preacher. This defense no bully pulpit where I sermonize our epitasis, a Woody Allen-like tragic comedy in which I play serendipity and am blinded by you, a star, Jupiter. Third brightest in the night, spitting image of the sky god. Patience might be for pipits and forever a spit of land neighboring Atlantis, but I'll wait my turn. Pity your first marriage ended. I didn't mind her as much as this Jolie Pitt situation, complete with pitter-patter of 12 Benetton-inspired feet. I'm not bitter. My pit bull still bears your name, and I sometimes call my man, who I'm going to Pittsburgh with, or is it Harrisburg, for a wedding in a week, out his name into yours, Brad Pitt. Hallucinations of you and I, topped only by Brandon and I on Peach Pit counters, the original 90210 hangout. Even then, I would wish he were you, Adonis epitome, abandon Hollywood for Bed-Stuy, skip down spittle-paved sidewalks to my brownstone, my poetry pittance, your movie money. I suspect we'd do fine with our combined capital. We'd be the mixed-race Pitts from Tompkins Park. I'd be hospitable, hosting meet and greets so as not to appear brand new, not to appear uppity. Casually introducing you to neighbors, I'd say, oh, this is Brad. This is just Brad Pitt. You'll find macabre humor in my obsession with Poe's Pit and the pendulum and the palpitating telltale heart, and it goes on and on.
Okay. That's great. It's really great. It's really great. Okay. So, one of the things that I use a lot is the newspaper. So and literature. So this poem is called Villette, and I've read it a lot because I like it. And Villette was either the third or fourth novel by Charlotte Bronte. You guys remember her back in the day. And so she wrote Jane Eyre, and basically the trope for her novels would be like this: poor, impoverished governess You know, she's a near homeless governess, you know, trundling through the countryside after much pain and no gain, finds a man, even though he's horrendous, and he marries her, and she no longer has to be a governess. She no longer has to work anymore. In the last novel that she wrote, Villette, Lucy Snow goes to, I think it's Belgium or whatever, and takes up with a kind of hysterical man. He's hysterical, and but she's learning her craft as a governess. You know what I mean? And this guy is just crazy, and you think, well, it's going to end like all the other novels, that she's going to marry this man and not have to be debased, you know, as a Victorian woman by having to work so fucking hard as a teacher. But instead, the guy at the end of the novel, he's traveling somewhere, and his ship drowns at sea. And Lucy Snow opens up a school. And so this becomes the first, to me, celebration of an independent woman at work. So, and that's not what the poem is about. That's just the title of the poem, Villette. One of the scholars I think that we're deeply indebted to, and he's gone, and I never got a chance to study with him, was Edward Said. So he'd be one of the people who I would read, I know other people have done it, who would begin to analyze Victorian literature. So at the same time, we have this wonderful burgeoning feminist novel. As you know, the Brontes and Dickens and all of them were fucking racist. You know that. You know Edgar Allan Poe, he was poor. I just got through reading his biography. But his stepmother was rich, and so there's a little section in there where he sold a slave. That was the high point in his life. So here we have this, we're still grappling with this, you know, feminism and racism is just, you know, it's not working out, you know what I mean? Again, that's not what this poem is about, but so anyway, but but that's where the title comes from. But anyway, there's a quote in here from Charlotte Bronte, because she really could write. They always have given her little sister all the credit, you know, for her book. But so I'm going to make a little quote, and again, this is just kind of a kind of language poet type of thing, and you know, you're not supposed to know what it means, so don't worry about it. Villette. 1. She broke again the fixed place of public eyes. The station was a train, and she promised herself home to tea and hot, happy bun. You see, the trees are green without blight, and the moon a grand round of brie. Roses, stinky labials, and a child's arm drops to the ground, chopped in Sierra Leone. Diamonds swirl from the sewage stump. She sees this and fractures what is left of light. Teenage soldiers contemplate the taste of human flesh. Soft tissue, silver shoes turned to lead boots in a bed of black sheets, which is not some silly symbol for death, but a Pottery Barn platform bed with Charter Club black dazzlement sheets from Macy's. Hooks for hands. She dances in on ice. Step, shuffle, step, step. Laughter unbolts one breast. The bottom is always relative to how low you will go, how far you have. The bottom is always relative to how low you will go, how far you have been, and if you can sing. 2. It was a white Banlon short sleeve shirt, tight. I was 23 years old, sitting on the floor of Ed Mock's dance studio. A girl looked at the words I had embroidered in green thread on the back of my shirt. Field nigger. She hesitated, then asked me if I played baseball. 3. This is Charlotte. Certain junctures in our lives must always be difficult to recall. Certain points, crises, certain feelings, joys, griefs, amazements, when reviewed, must strike us as things wildered and whirling, dim as a wheel spun fast. I love you with all that is in me. I have held you close as a skin, constant as animal hunger, like the man in Harlem who bought a tiger cub over the internet and kept it in a 5-room apartment with an alligator and a kitten. 415 pounds large with longing. My heart swells and my feet slip, taffeta, organza, tulle, clouds, claws. I am lost without your pages, Charlotte, pages of worlds gone to the grave. I loves you, Porgy. If you can keep me, I want to stay here. The trees are so green, they make your eyes young.
That's great. So I have one more question just based on that poem. So I asked you, what does fiction allow you to do that poetry doesn't? The opposite of that. What does poetry allow you to do that fiction doesn't?
I kind of sing and not have to make sense and not have to have a plot and not have the editor say, well, I don't get the transition here. You know what I mean? There's a freedom here in the poems, and I try to take it. I mean, it's just like, you know, you don't go to jump in the swimming pool and try to play baseball. You know what I mean? So each genre gives you something, and so you know, you go into the poetry, and this in its own way tells a story, but there's no beginning, middle, and end. There's just a different there's an emotional valence that keeps on going. But I'm not trying to make sense. I'm trying to follow kind of illogical sequence of feelings, really, rather than thoughts. So let's open it up.
Yeah.
Your turn.
And if we
there's
could
the microphones over there. If you want to talk, you have to go to the microphones. Or can the microphones come to the people? Yeah. Can someone take on the job of taking the microphone to people if they can't get up? Okay. So all you have to do now is raise your hand, and the microphone will come to you if you have questions. Yeah.
Hi, good evening. I may be a little bit out of it because I travel around a lot, but I missed whether you had this type of session with Alice Walker.
I've never really met Alice Walker.
Have you ever had any interest? If you did, get the opportunity to do this type of session, what would you like to ask her, and what would you like to tell her?
I think I would, of course, like to tell her what millions of other people have told her, just how influential her work is and how much it affected my life and growth as a writer. And then I would have to just sit down and what you do when you do these type of things, you just sit down, you read the person's work, and then you think of what it is that you really want to say, because I wouldn't just sit up there for an hour, bowing down, giving homage. But I really think that she's an amazing writer. And actually, they are doing a film on her. They're doing a film on her, and I was invited to talk about her for the film. But she wasn't there, so it wasn't a dialogue.
A lot of people were angry at her. Just like you were saying, a lot of people were angry.
Well, yeah, she has a beautiful poem. I can't recite it by heart, but it says, "Be nobody's darling." So she started out, she wrote that poem when she was very young, "Be nobody's darling," you know what I mean? So she knew what she was doing, and she knew that people were going to be angry at her. And I mean, she absorbed a lot of the pain and anger in a certain kind of way. Her, Michelle Wallace, and Tazaki Shange, these women were on the front line. They took it in a certain kind of way so that women like me could come through. They had already cleared away. So yeah, people were furious at her, especially for talking about clitoridectomy. I mean, it's just like there were a group of women who wrote the New York Times and said she needed to shut up. You know what I mean? So again, their thing was, what is she doing right about it? We'll write about it. Well, when, motherfuckers? When? It's been going on 1,000 years. You hoes ain't written about it. When you gonna write about it? You know what I mean? So she wrote about it, and they got mad at her. You know what I mean? My God, you know what it is? A little girl gets her clitoris cut off, and you're talking about don't write about it. Wait, we'll write about it in an effective way that doesn't make us look bad. Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much. My students have gotten so much out of your work. Things that actually left with them in a good way out of the classroom. So thank you. Two very small, quick questions.
Right.
Is the character Abdul fused together out of people that you've known or met or interviewed? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the same way, in an interview with Katie Couric, you said while you were doing work that you
Right.
fused together. And then
Right.
the other quick question is, you said that sometimes self-censorship is what creates a lot of authorial silence.
Right.
What are the strategies that you have when you're writing or before you're writing to get through that psychological barrier so you can get at that truth?
So I have a very effective strategy for censorship, which I share with my students, and it helps with the writing. It doesn't necessarily help all the way, but one of the things I tell myself is, and it was told to me, well, just because you write it, don't mean you have to publish it. You know what I mean? So just get it out there. You know what I mean? Just get it out there. You know what I mean? Just go ahead and write it, and then we'll deal with that public. We'll deal with your mother later. Who knows? Your mother may die before you know, by the time you finish it. So that's the one thing. I mean, I think it's horrific if the actual writing doesn't happen. You know what I mean? And then I think let us begin to think about what we're really doing. What we're really doing here. You know, we're here to take a risk. You know, hopefully you have family and friends who will stand by you, or you have a strong inner soul, but we're really not here to be liked. I mean, there's a way that, you know, like I'm always wondering, why aren't people talking about these things more? You know what I mean? Why, you know, why aren't we, the only book I've really read about rape in prison was by a white man. And he's talking about being raped by black men in the prison. How come we have all these prison memoirs and all these, you know, there's the WBAI, the prison show. Why aren't we hearing about this? You know what I mean? Why is there so much censorship? Why is, I was on tour, I met a young nurse, and she's a nurse. She does nothing but HIV, you know, she works at a clinic. And she said people come into the clinic with their hoods pulled over their head. She said, I have people coming in here, their families, nobody knows that they're infected. You know what I mean? So there's just a level of silence and censorship that the whole culture is involved in. One of the things with Push, I toured all over the world, and I would get people, Amsterdam, France, Germany, all over, you know, little white girls would come up to me and talk about the same thing happened to me. Same thing happened to me, over and over again. And at some point, I began to say, well, tell people, you know what I mean? Because one of the criticisms I get as a black woman writer is, well, you black women are always writing about this. Why don't white women write about it? If it's happening to you, you know, why is it a big whisper? And it took me a while to figure out is the black women talk about it because we have nothing to lose. There is no inheritance. There is no property. We're not, you know, there is no. We're not going to get kicked off the family estate. We're not going to get left out the will. But the white women are hesitant to. First, they suffer that great loss with the abuse as a child, and then, you know, they don't want to let go of the money, you know, or whatever the status is within the family. So they uphold the system that has abused them in the first place, becoming perpetrators, and at the same time, great supporters of the black women who are talking. You know what I mean? So Abdul is a composite character. One of the jobs I had was as a mediator, you know, with the Children's Aid Society. I have friends who are therapists, social workers. So I spent a lot of time trying to talk to people, whoever would talk to me about the issues that come up in the kid. But also, we're living in a different culture now than we were when Push was written. So a lot of the information that I based the kid on is published. So there's a whole group of writers just like, doctors and nutritionists, psychotherapists. I have one book at home, Male Children Who Abuse. Nothing but case studies of male children who abuse. So I knew what I was talking about. So the work is out there. It's just not in, I would say like 30 years ago, it just wasn't out there. But now, you can find, if you want more information about that information exists. So I think I was dealing with pretty good information. And then he just became this song in my soul. I wanted an artist child. I wanted a child. I was so tired of pressure. She couldn't read. She couldn't write. Abdul can read and he can write, and he's going to be the master of his world. You know what I mean? And so I really wanted to write the story of an artist and of a dancer. And so he's horrific, but he's also wonderful. He's optimistic. I think he's a fabulous character.
Hi, thanks so much for your work. I really love your work. I'm a writer and a psychotherapist, and I know I had done in-home work in Michigan, and I came across so much child abuse, so much sexual abuse, and even people in the field don't want to hear about it.
They're tired of it. They're overwhelmed.
You talk about it and they say, no, you're not supposed to be there because the parent is an alcoholic, and of course it would come out that there'd be sexual abuse. And I worked with so many families where nobody wanted to hear about it or know about it or do anything about it, and it's heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. And I worked in Detroit also with some of the young men who might be Abdul grown up, kind of gangsters, drug dealers, and I just wonder what you feel. You're an activist and you're writing about it, but what you feel can be done for some of these young people.
I don't know. What was interesting with Push is that a lot of people would come up to me who were social workers and therapists and stuff, and they said, "Oh, we encounter that every day." And I was really expecting that when I went out on tour with the kid. I wasn't expecting men to get up and say, "I've experienced that," although I did have one brave young man get up and say, "I've experienced that." So I was in Tennessee at a bookstore, and kind of had this feeling, it was deja vu when it happened to me. And then I realized, no, this is 2011. This is not 1996. So two young women came up to me and they said, "Oh, we hear this story all the time." And I said, "Are you guys social workers?" And she says, "No, we're death row lawyers. And by the time they get to us, it's too late." So that's when they're making those last appeals and they start to talk, this is what they talk about. This is what these men start to talk about. This is what has landed them there.
Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering about what you feel like writing gives you. So in the writing and in the revision, what do you feel like you get? Does that make sense?
What do I feel like I get? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. I feel like for me when I'm writing,
yeah, that's great.
I can write about what's going on or something. It doesn't have to be all true. Mm-hmm. But putting it on the page and then going through the process of revision gives me some space to let go of something or to process something. So I'm wondering, not that it has to be the same for you, but just what do you feel like you get from
give me
writing?
I think what it gives me is a chance to put all the letters of the alphabet together in ways that are new, to create, to be an artist, to speak and do the things that are unspeakable sometimes, but that are also beautiful. I remember going to hear, I think it was Charlie Hayden, the bassist, and he said, our job he was talking about musicians, but I think I'm a musician too. He said, our job is to bring beauty in the world. I think that the kid, wild thing, precious, these things that have been declared so ugly that if you write about them from the bottom of your soul, they can become beauty. So I like to think that, you know, what the writing gives me is a chance to become an artist and to create. And then I want to say for the young women and young men in the audience that at some point what the writing gave me was a living. Was a living. So I began to make a living as an artist, and that was something that they keep telling you can't do. It's you know, even if it's a, you know, you're going to be in your 200 square foot studio, you can begin to make a living as an artist if you take it seriously. You know what I mean? So that was, and are willing to make sacrifices. So that was important to me, that I could have a lifestyle or a calling, a path that I could really follow, and take it to as far as my willingness to work would allow me to take it.
Any other questions?
You can go sign some books now.
Yeah. Well, we just want to thank you. Penn wants to thank you. New School wants to thank you. And Sapphire and I would like to thank you for coming.